Dude, never did it.
Welcome to Never Did It. It's the podcast where two best friends talk about movies that they have never seen. We've been choosing movies for each other from the last 100 years. But this week, we're going to try to do something a little bit different, and we're going to cover some very, very current movies as we're hopping aboard the Barbenheimer hype train and talking about the two hottest new releases of the year, 2023.
I just want to say, because this came up, we are spoiling both of these movies.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There's no way for us to talk about this without spoiling these movies. There are lots of spoiler-free reviews everywhere, but I find them just deathly dull. We're gonna spoil the crap out of these movies. We don't want to spoil you, so if you don't want to know what happens in these movies, just come back after you've seen them.
I agree.
It's funny how this came to be. You haven't heard these episodes yet because we're doing this episode. This is our designated 2023 episode. We won't be doing any other movies specifically about 2023 in 2023. And also, this is cutting the line, because what's the point of getting on the hype train if we can't get a little juice off of it while the train is running fast? A couple episodes from now, you're going to hear us talk about a couple of movies in 1924, and then there's going to be a little bonus. And then a few episodes from there, we're going to talk about a couple movies from sometime in the early 70s. I forget exactly the year. And there's a little bonus. So he started doing these cool things. But while we were doing one of them, I think the 1924 episode, Jake was like, yeah, that's cool. You want to do another cool thing? Let's talk about Barbie and Oppenheimer the weekend they come out. And since we both had tickets to see both movies by the time the following Thursday was going to happen, I was like, yeah, let's do that. And it fits for 2023. So now, instead of 100 movies or 200 movies, 100 years, it's 101 years, 202 movies.
I think we can do that.
Yeah, it'll be all right. Everyone will survive. I'm not changing the graphic. It's the same. Jake, what did you think of the movie Barbie?
I loved Barbie. I loved it a lot. I went with my wife, who is, for full disclosure, I am a 41-year-old male. My wife, a 31-year-old female, and we have a daughter. She's 11 girl. All three of us were very excited, and all of us were excited for different reasons. I was excited because it's a Greta Gerwig film. Noah Baumbach had co-written it. Those are people that I like their other movies, so it didn't matter if it was a Barbie movie or whatever kind of movie. Those are names that I'm going to be interested in regardless. My wife grew up playing with Barbies. There's a nostalgia factor there for her. And my daughter currently plays with Barbies, and still like a very very much a thing in her life. So the three of us were all really excited, and it was, we just had a really good time. It was a movie that I was excited to see with a crowd. Like, I actually thought it would be fun. It turned out there wasn't as much laughter as I would have liked, because I was laughing by myself a couple of times as probably the oldest male in the audience. I think there were a couple of other females around, like I said, around my age or maybe a little bit older, but I was definitely the oldest male in the audience. There were definitely a few things that only I laughed at, but it was still fun to see with the crowd. There was just there was an energy, and there was just an excitement to it that it's almost back. It's like pre-pandemic excitement. I haven't felt that at the movies in quite a while, and I've seen a lot of great movies at the theater, but this one had a feeling and an excitement to it that hasn't been seen in a while. The lobby was all full. People were dressed up, young kids, all the way up to my age and even a little bit older. It's just a big cross section of people, and everybody agreeing on something for a change.
It's interesting to hear that women dressing up, mostly women, not entirely, but mostly women dressing up to go see Barbie. My wife and I were in the vast minority, not dressed up, seeing this movie. It was, I'm pretty sure, a sold out theater that I was at. If not totally sold out, then close to it. The bit that you mentioned with not everyone laughing at the jokes you laughed at, I had a very similar experience. I want to talk about a little bit the crowd I saw it with. So it sounds like it was very similar to the crowd you saw it with. And I think a friend of mine texted me a meme that this is white women's Wakanda Forever, or white women's Black Panther. This woman who sat next to me, I thought I was going to be in a lot of trouble. Because a woman and her friend sat next to me, and she starts talking about how this is the cinematic event of the year, of the decade, of her life. And I was like, okay, I mean, it's big. It's certainly a big cinematic event, mostly because Warner and Mattel figured out how to market the crap out of this movie. And they did that so well.
Brilliant.
But she also laughed at the least funny parts of the Migration and Trolls 3 trailers when they came on, which I found super frustrating. And then when Taika Waititi's name came up for the rugby movie, she goes, maybe. And then She had the same reaction to the Gran Turismo trailer, which the reaction to the Gran Turismo trailer should be, no, we are not doing a Gran Turismo movie, but it wasn't. She said maybe. So I don't understand what the taste is of the woman who was sitting next to me in the theater. So I was like, oh no, I'm in a lot of trouble. This woman's going to ruin my experience of this movie. But she in the end mostly laughed at like all the right places, not at the Kubrick references that I was laughing at, but at most of the right places. But then who did ruin the movie was the two girls sitting next to Annie were just on their phone the whole time. And at one point just recording the screen. It was wild.
Oh yeah,
so,
I've seen that on the TikTok. My wife is on TikTok, and she showed me that like people have just been just recording clips of the movie and putting it on TikTok. Like, why are we doing this?
It's just for clout, for TikTok clout, I guess. So that hadn't even occurred to me. I haven't seen that. I get a different nook of TikTok than your wife does, I'm sure. Wow, we were blown away by that. There's just no theater etiquette anymore. Although I will say, and we'll get into this more, at Oppenheimer, the theater was silent for the whole movie. But we'll get to that later. So tell me, what did you think of the movie itself?
The movie itself, I thought it again was a lot of fun. I mean, Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig are talented writers. I mean, we know this. This is no surprise. So just seeing what they could do with a concept that's very inherently, it's very silly. It's definitely kind of the silliest thing I've probably seen from either of them, but it's also I thought it was really clever. Ryan Gosling, I think, is just a treat for the entire movie. I'd really just loved basically everything he did and everything he said. I really liked like some of the supporting characters. It was really fun to see people like Kingsley Ben-Adir, who I mostly know from One Night in Miami playing Malcolm X, and now he's just this just kind of big goofy drum playing Ken. And Michael Cera had a couple of just these really funny little moments, like where he's trying to hop the fence and then he has to move that little chair over and then he still can't get over the fence, and just all these cute little funny little moments, and then some other sad little moments too between I thought they had a pretty good story, I think, with America Ferrera and the daughter. I mean, it wasn't super deep, and they maybe could have done some more with that. They could have done some more with the daughter. Has that big speech about how Barbie's been a negative impact on culture and society, and that was really like the only time they ever brought it up, and they kind of dropped it completely after that. It's like one little speech, which I thought was good, and I read that they actually had to fight to keep that in the movie. Mattel wanted to take it out entirely, and Margot Robbie and the actor, I don't remember the daughter's name. I don't remember the actor's name, but they had to actually perform it for the executives because, like, no, this actually makes sense. We have to, you have to see it. You can't just read it. It makes sense if you see it. So they got to keep it in the movie. So yeah, I mean, they could have done some other things with that, but for the most part, like I said, I just really enjoyed the movie so much. It made me smile. I could enjoy it with my wife and my kid, and it was just, I just had a great time. I really, really liked it.
So I liked it, but I didn't love it. In fact, I think when I saw it, I may have had fonder feelings for it. I saw both of these movies yesterday. I started my day with Oppenheimer, had a quick lunch, saw Barbie. Honestly, I was like energized by the whole activity. I didn't find it exhausting at all. It was a beautiful day. We walked a lot before we saw the first movie. I saw it with Annie. Then we walked a lot between the movies and walked quite a bit home. Didn't feel exhausted or annoyed by it. My only comp is that when The Dark Knight Rises premiered, I saw Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises all on the same night, leading into the third one premiering. And I can talk more about that when we talk about Oppenheimer. That's my only other like major double feature, more than 5 hours at a movie theater situation. Wow. And I found, now granted, this was 2 movies instead of 3, and I moved around a lot between the movies this time. I didn't then. That was all at one theater. I found this way more energizing. But anyway, we saw this movie and Annie loved Barbie. I don't know I didn't really ask her what her feelings were about Barbie itself, but she found the feminist message of the movie really representative. She felt very seen by it. There's a speech that America Ferrera gives near the climax of the movie that's sort of like the turning point into the third act. I felt a little bit, and I had the same feeling when I saw Avengers Endgame, and there's a scene where all of the female characters beat up one of the villains together, and then they all march together towards the screen. And in that moment, I remember when I saw it the first time, I felt a little bit of like this feels pandery. And then a second later, a bunch of girls in the theater started cheering for it. And I was like, okay, good. It's not for me. And they liked it. And the people who it is for liked it. So I'm into it. No one cheered when America Ferrera gave this speech because it's not like a cheering moment per se. It's more like it got some laughs. But to me, in the moment, it felt like this is all stuff I've heard in YouTube skits over the last 10 years. And that was all I really got from it. But after the movie, my first question for Annie, who was over the moon, I could tell, I said, what did you think of that speech? And she goes, oh, I loved it. I feel all those things are true. I feel those pressures pulling me from each way a lot. It didn't feel manufactured to her. And you did the caveat at the beginning that you're a 41-year-old man and I'm a 39-year-old man. This movie's not made expressly for me, although clearly a lot of people like you and me saw it because it made $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with it. And what I liked a little more than that speech was all the little mini speeches they gave after that as a plot device. I thought those were all very funny and more well placed. That being said, again, none of that was for me. What was for me was the Ken's collective musical number at the end. Holy crap.
I
funny.
Fell out of my chair. I seriously almost fell out of my chair. I was doubled over.
Incredible. Although it made me annoyed that there weren't more musical numbers in the movie. Why shouldn't Barbie be a musical? All the Barbie cartoons are musicals, and some of those songs have gone super viral on TikTok. So why not make the Barbie movie a musical? That sort of feels like an actual missed opportunity to me. And that brings me to my Noah Baumbach question, which is, have you seen White Noise?
Oh, yeah. I watched it was it last year or 2 years ago?
It was last year.
Last year. Yeah. Yeah, we watched it.
What did you think of it?
I remember thinking it was interesting-ish, worth a watch, but probably would never go back to it. It was a bit tough to get through.
So I felt the same.
I really loved the song at the end.
Well, okay, I'm glad you bring up the song at the end because that's what got me thinking. I thought, wait, maybe Noah Baumbach, because as I'm watching the movie, and I'm not granted, I've just come from Oppenheimer, and spoiler alert for later in this podcast, I think it's one of the best movies in years. But I was ready for a different kind of movie. But as I'm watching Barbie, I was like, oh, I think maybe Gerwig fell off, or maybe the script isn't super tight. Maybe Baumbach fell off. And at the end of the movie, when there's this huge musical number that I loved, I was like, it's Baumbach. And it just, the whole movie felt like just the tiniest bit off to me. Like the script didn't quite hang together. I didn't think that the America Ferrera and her daughter stuff worked at all. In fact, it had me thinking of, I recently watched Chef, and Chef is a great movie. And the stuff with the kid is meant to be the centerpiece of Chef. But the stuff with the kid is actually not what works about Chef, because I never buy when I'm watching that movie that's his son. I never buy that the things he says to his son are the things that a person would say. That being said, I actually know a couple of people who would say stuff like that to their sons. And I think that those people stink, just like people who are really into their own BS.
Yeah.
And the son's like a fine actor. And this girl in the movie is a totally fine actor. She doesn't crap the bed at all. She does a good job. They're not really given that much to do. And they felt a little tacked on. It just felt like Gerwig felt as though she needed humans to ground the movie. And I don't think she did, because my favorite thing about the movie is just how bananas the bananas parts were. The set design was incredible. I've heard her. Gerwig's been talking about all her influences like Wizard of Oz, Truman Show, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Like, they nailed the set design. This was so perfect. This bubblegum artificial world was perfect. And when they went to the real world, I was kind of bummed out until they get to the chase scene in the Mattel building, because that felt heightened and weird, just like Barbie Land did. And so I really liked that. And even the boardroom felt like heightened and weird. And Will Ferrell was very funny.
I mean, yeah, he's just, whatever he said. I was trying to remember the funny things he said in the movie, but then I'm like, everything he says is funny. How can I possibly remember one line over the other?
It's actually not even about the words he said. It's just sort of about how he falls over himself all the time. We've said this to each other all the time. He cannot not be funny. Even if what he's saying is lame, even if the movie he's in is bad, you look at him and it makes you feel happy because he's inherently funny. So for me, I gave it 4 stars at the time. I wonder if maybe on a rewatch it might get lower. Having said all that, I do love what the movie represents. I love that. So Oppenheimer, we'll get into this. I'll get into this in length. It's a very Jewish movie. I'm watching Barbie right after. I'm like, there's nothing Jewish about this. And then that's not true, because Kingsley Ben-Adir is in it. And Hari Nef is in it. And then Rhea Perlman shows up as the creator of Barbie, who is also Jewish. So I felt like a nice bit of representation there. I mean, I also really liked how it's funny how Mattel handled this movie. They took swipes at themselves while also patting themselves on the back a lot. And then they bring out the creator of Barbie, and to head off any criticisms they could have of her, they have her lampshade. Oh, by the way, I know I'm a tax cheat and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, I don't think that was necessary. We could have just celebrated her. Who
Like it's Rhea
cares?
Perlman. I mean, we like her, and I liked her part a lot. I think she's just delightful.
I did really love the scene that Barbie has with her in the Mattel building. That felt very Matrix. I mean, this movie's also got Matrix as a pretty big influence. You know, you got the high heel Birkenstock as their red pill, blue pill moment. And then you've got and then that movie was very much like seeing the Oracle. It was like all the good parts of the Matrix. Another thing that this movie did well was pull the best things from its influences. For me, the script didn't totally hold together.
And I do agree with a lot of the criticisms of the movie. When I went to rate it on my Letterboxd, I went ahead and gave it the 5 stars because there was a lot of the intangible qualities about it that made it really, it was more about the experience, the movie and the experience for me, because I really did enjoy the movie. I laughed a lot. I was really into it. It was, like I said, it moved really fast. It looked great. There were people in it who I didn't know were funny, being funny. Like I said, Kingsley Ben-Adir, I did not know was funny. It was funny. And I also love that one little scene. There was another scene that they tried to cut from the movie, and it's just really brief. It's when Margot Robbie tells that older woman sitting on the bench, she just tells her, "Oh, you're so beautiful," and she says, "Oh, oh, I know it," or whatever. And I didn't know this. I had to read it afterwards, but that's Anne Roth, who was like the greatest costume designer in film history. I didn't know that. I was like, "Oh, that's nice that they had her in that movie," and they had to fight to keep that in the movie too. They tried to cut that out.
That's cool. I actually felt in the moment that scene felt tacked on.
I didn't quite get it. And that's why I was glad, like when I was kind of reading, I was like, okay, someone's got to mention this, because I mean, I know Anne Roth by name, but I certainly don't, I didn't know her on sight. So
right.
Yeah, I thought.
But what was it? Like, okay, so Barbie sees, let's say it's Anne Roth. Fine. I mean, it is Anne Roth. We don't have to say it. So it's Anne Roth. And Barbie sees her, an old woman. Barbie's feeling pretty low. She looks over at Anne Roth. She says, "You're beautiful." Anne Roth says, "I know." What was that? Like at that point in Barbie's journey, and also keep in mind, Barbie has never been bad. And Barbie has never thought anyone was ugly. Like it feels like that's a scene in a movie where the main character, who has been vain, looks at someone older and realizes she's beautiful, tells her she's beautiful. And this woman's like, I don't need the validation, but thank you. Mm-hmm. But at this point in Barbie's journey, she's been nothing but nice to everyone, except for the people, the men who've been assaulting her, but whatever. She's nice to them. I was like, this is out of place at this point in this movie for this character. It felt like something that should happen later in a movie to a character that had different problems earlier in the movie. So if it's just a celebration of Anne Roth, first off, I don't think anyone who watched this movie knows who that is. I mean, we didn't.
Certainly doesn't.
No, well, okay. So then now there's also, let's get into this. There's also the question that who's this movie for? I've seen this bandied about a bunch. I assume Viv liked it.
She did. She loved it. We've been listening to, we have the soundtracks. I mean, we've been listening to the soundtrack, and like I said, we've listened to Ryan Gosling's cover of Push probably 20 times, and we laugh every time. And she really loved it. I think there's some of the, I think a few of the jokes went over her head, but I think for the most part, by her age, 10, 11, 12, I think there's enough in there for kids to enjoy. I think much younger than that, I mean, I don't know if they're going to get a whole lot out of it other than it looks pretty and it's kind of zany,
right? And that might be enough, honestly. I mean, if you're okay with your kids hearing, I mean, there are some sex jokes in it, and some of the stuff is a little bit complicated, but I think my favorite joke in the movie, and then I want to get back to what I was saying, but I think my favorite joke in the movie is they go up to a bunch of construction workers, thinking that the construction workers will be women because they all are in Barbie land. And then the construction workers all catcall her, and her response is like, "Oh, well, I don't have a vagina and he doesn't have a penis," and they're all like, "Oh, we're cool with that. That's fine, whatever." I thought that was one of the better jokes in the movie. And also, you mentioned Push. No one in my theater laughed at that. I don't think they'd heard that song before.
Yeah. Oh, I laughed so hard because I was kind of expecting, I thought, okay, this is going to be like Creed or something. I knew it was going to be something like that. And then I don't know, just for some reason that song was just perfect. And it was a really good song. Like we were talking about, my wife and I were talking about maybe other Matchbox 20 songs. Like, would any of their other songs would have worked? It's like, no, I don't think it would have, because Push has just like the right cadence and like the right speed for them to sing it in a group.
It's also a misogynistic song.
They say it's Matchbox 20 says it's not.
You know what? I don't trust him at all because he made Matchbox 20 music.
Yeah.
And I would say Matchbox 20 is Creed adjacent. And also no one would have understood no one would have laughed at Creed either, because none of the people who saw this movie
just
know these bands. But that being said, who is this movie for? I literally think it's for anyone. It's a pretty big crowd pleaser. But by being for anyone, there's stuff in it that is for no one, like this Anne Roth thing. That one I wouldn't have pushed to keep. I do think that it was important that it's funny. I had read that article that Mattel wanted to nix a joke and they had to perform it, and I didn't know what scene it was. So I'm very happy they kept the Barbie as a fascist scene. But yeah, I was kind of annoyed, not surprised, because the same thing happened in Air. Earlier this year in Air, there's a scene where Jason Bateman's character talks about how there's child labor for Nike sneakers, and then it's never addressed again. The Nike's all good. And that was what this scene was for Barbie.
Greta Gerwig says it's like key, like she says it's like key to the whole movie.
She's wrong.
Yeah. That's the article I read. Yeah.
Yeah, but like that's like the dude from, what's his name? He has the same name as a showrunner, the lead singer of Matchbox 20.
Rob Thomas,
right? Because a different Rob Thomas created Veronica Mars and some other stuff. Yeah. I don't think either of them are right. Okay, so if it's not misogynistic, what is it?
I'd have to look back. Because I was thinking like, yeah, what is this song? What do they think this song is about? And I read it. I'd have let me pull it up. Actually, I'll tell you while I'm looking that up too. My favorite joke. I can't remember if I had texted this to you or not, but my favorite joke was right near the end of the movie when Barbie and Ken are having their heart to heart or whatever, and talking about the patriarchy, and Ken says, yeah, once I realized it wasn't about the patriarchy wasn't about horses, I kind of lost interest. I
lost interest almost right away.
I lost interest right away because it's such a great performance by Ryan Gosling, because if you just isolate the things he says, especially to like the other women, they're these horrible misogynistic things, like the scene with the woman doctor where he's like, oh, I need to see a doctor, a real doctor. Like he says, they're just awful, but he's so endearing the way he says them and like the way he delivers it, and he's so funny in it.
Two things about that. I'm really, really, really glad you brought that up, because when the trailer came out, that joke was in the trailer. And I saw so much Twitter discourse over that joke saying that doesn't make sense. In Barbie land, all the doctors would be women. Why does Ryan Gosling think all the doctors should be men? It was an example of two things. One, don't judge a movie until you see the movie. And two, don't put a joke in the trailer that doesn't make sense.
Right. So I don't watch trailers, because I don't want to see any of that. I just would like to wait and see the movie.
You're a better man than most for doing that. That being said, and this was an example of a trailer screwing it up and people's reaction to the trailer being screwed up. And then the other thing was, what I thought was interesting was Ken turning out to be the sort of villain. But I did like that Ken got to be redeemed at the end. I've seen some, and I don't know how much lip service I should pay to this, but there has been some criticism of the movie saying that the message feels like men and women can't get along, so they have to just act separate from each other. And I don't think that that's a fair critique of the movie, but I do think that an okay critique of the movie might be, or is it even a critique of the movie? I do think what the movie is saying is that not everything needs to be about men and women pairing. Some things can be about men and women having more to do separately. Mm-hmm. And Ken's issue is never resolved. Like Ken as an individual is redeemed, but his problem is never resolved. Like he doesn't get a girl at the end. He's not noticed by everyone at the end. Mm-hmm. He's still in the wilderness as far as his wants and needs are concerned. But having said that, and having seen Oppenheimer, women's issues in movies are often never resolved. So yeah, it's okay. We can, as the representative of men, we can take it. All right. So you found what happened to Rob Thomas to Push. What's the deal?
Rob Thomas, he was surprised when he heard the song was being interpreted as misogynistic.
When it came out.
Said that a former girlfriend of his was an ingredient in the song, but other people have scarred me. I mean, I'm not going to pay my third grade librarian who gave me shit about not returning green eggs and ham. No idea what that means. In an interview with The Morning Call, Thomas described the song as falling in and out of love, with bass guitarist Brian Yale adding, "We were kind of surprised when we heard all that stuff. Our response was, wow, really? No, it's not about that. I mean, just meet us. We're not the manliest men of all time. I'm a short guy. I don't think I could kick anyone's ass."
Oh my God. They don't understand the criticism. This is just nice guy behavior. The song is misogynist. They're wrong.
Yeah.
This is just like, I said a mean thing, but I'm not a mean guy. So why are people mad at me? That's all I'm hearing.
Fragile white guys.
Terrible.
I say that as a white guy.
Rob Thomas is lame. Anything else? Do you have anything else you want to say about Barbie?
No, I'm just glad that it lived up, to the hype and that it's making all this money. And I think it's cool. I mean, it's been a cool thing to have going on this summer.
Awesome. Oh, one last thing. I'm going to talk about during Oppenheimer quite a bit about his whole film. We are going to talk about where it fits in his filmography.
Oh yeah.
Greta Gerwig's is much smaller. She's only solo directed 3 movies and directed as a whole 4. I didn't watch Nights and Weekends before coming on this podcast, or even try to before seeing Barbie. And I looked at a trailer for it, and I'm pretty glad I didn't, because she co-directed it with Joe Swanberg, and it feels much more like a Joe Swanberg thing than it feels like what wound up being Greta Gerwig's milieu, for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
Also, that might be the good word. I just hate saying it. Whereas Baumbach isn't all that mumblecore improv, regular person banality.
Mhm.
Gerwig seems much more interested, as Barbie really shows, and as Lady Bird and Little Women also showed, in just like the feminine experience. And I don't think that I don't know, having not seen it, but it did not feel like Nights and Weekends was going to help inform that.
But yeah, she's 3 for 3. I mean, I think it's a pretty impressive start.
Are you excited for her 4 and 5 to be Chronicles of Narnia movies?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I liked those books as a kid, and I mean, she's a filmmaker that again, she's, I think, even with just these 3 movies, she's earned some benefit of the doubt, where I'm like, okay, I wasn't sitting around going, man, I hope somebody makes more Narnia movies. I'd really like to see that. But if it's her, like, sure, I'll bite.
I'm curious what her take on this ultra Christian literature is.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, but although, to be fair, I've liked every Chronicles of Narnia movie I've seen, so
they're solid. Yeah.
So what am I going to complain? But let's move on to Oppenheimer. This movie is mammoth. We both sacrificed to see this movie. I got my tickets a month ahead of time to see a 10 a.m. screening in New York City's only 70 millimeter IMAX theater. You drove 3 hours to get to your 70 millimeter
That's right.
IMAX theater in Michigan. So, Jake, what'd you think about Oppenheimer?
Wow, this was a movie that it's really big. Like, everything about this movie is big. This was the first time my wife had been to an IMAX movie of any kind. I hadn't been to one in years, and then I had actually just seen Mission Impossible a couple of weeks ago in the IMAX. This was the biggest IMAX screen I've ever seen. This one's total floor to ceiling. I mean, it's gigantic. We were probably sitting in like maybe the 5th or 6th row, so we were really close to it too. So yeah, so I have never been more in a movie at all, and it's a movie to admit that it made that the movie made me emotional, and in a weird sort of way, because I mean, yeah, it's very dramatic, what happens to him and just the whole story and the weight of it. It was one of those movies, and it's happened to me only a couple of other times, where like I didn't get tear up during the movie. It's not one of those movies where there's like, oh my gosh, there's these like a movie like Marriage Story, where they have these scenes that are like designed to just to get you feeling there's so much emotion that's just like embedded and packed into the story, that by the time the movie ended, and like just the simple credits, written and directed by Christopher Nolan or whatever, I was like, I was like overcome by that, like everything that had just happened in the 3 hours, and like feeling so just being so close to it and so into it. I was like, that was like a powerful experience. So I haven't had that very often at a movie theater. It was pretty awesome.
I think the way you said it overwhelms you over the course of 2 hours, and then it lulls you into maybe feeling a tiny bit bored, and then comes back at you for the final half hour.
That last half hour is unreal.
It's really wild. I had a very similar seating situation. We were 5th row, a little off to the left, and I remember thinking, oh no, we're too close. And I'd been in this theater once before to see The Last Jedi in 3D. And after seeing this movie, which was not 3D and yet was somehow 3D without glasses, which I don't know how he did that, but it worked. And it's not, look, it's a very visually striking movie, not just in the atom bomb of it all, but in the landscapes, and also in the close-ups, and really getting a sense of how people are feeling when they're focused on in the frame. As I'm sitting there before the movie started, we're watching the trailers, and I was like, oh no, we're too close. I can't keep track of everything that's happening on the screen. When the Dune 2 trailer played, I couldn't track the action on the screen. Now, it turned out it was because that the movie wasn't calibrated for the trailer. It was calibrated for the movie, luckily. But I was really worried. And then 5 minutes into the movie, I felt better, even though the first 30 minutes of the movie are really hard to internalize, because you're already in 3 different timelines, some in black and white. We'll talk about that in a sec, why Nolan chose to do those parts in black and white, most of it in color, but happening all at different times. And it takes a while to get the hang of what's happening when, or even what's happening before what else is happening, and which timeline you're really supposed to sink your teeth into, which for the first 2 hours is the Los Alamos building the bomb. But what made me I did get emotional throughout the movie. And this is personal to me, and maybe, I mean, other people may have this experience also, but I was really excited for this movie because I knew it was going to be focused, at least in part, on Oppenheimer's religion, which is one that you and I both share with him. I keep this list on Letterboxd. It's called A Jewish Experience in Motion Pictures. And I add, and you've helped me add to this, movies that are in any way about Judaism. This can be as much as a movie like A Serious Man, or as little as a movie like The Night Before.
Yeah, you should pin that list to your profile.
Maybe I will.
Yeah, I'd like to have access to that one without.
Sure. In fact, I'll do it as soon as this podcast is over.
Yep.
And you can see it by going to Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. But I remember months ago adding Oppenheimer, and in the weeks leading up to it, I wondered if it actually would feel like a Jewish movie. It's not a Jewish director. It's not a Jewish star, but it is focused on a Jewish man, and most of the cast playing the very Jewish group of scientists who built this bomb were played by Jewish characters. And so was the Jewish politician who runs up against Oppenheimer, played by the Jewish Robert Downey Jr. And I was so stoked about that. You know, there is certainly Jewish representation in Hollywood. The trope that Jews are in Hollywood is not completely baseless. Sorry for entertaining you for 100 years, but Jews as the focal point of movies has not been a reality. Even if Jews are making the movies, especially through World War II. We're gonna talk in several weeks. We're gonna talk about the life and death of Colonel Blimp, which I really liked. And there's and just a teaser for our conversation about that. There is a Jewish actor in that movie who portrays an immigrant from Germany, but he portrays a non-Jewish immigrant from Germany, as far as we can tell. So it's nice. I felt very represented. I think maybe in the same way that my wife felt represented by that speech in Barbie, I felt very represented just at several moments throughout the movie when like David Krumholtz would pop up, or Benny Safdie would pop up, or even Alden Ehrenreich, who it's not clear he's playing a Jewish character, but he's a Jewish actor. Just all these famous Jewish actors kept popping up. I kept getting choked up about, not at parts of the movie where he's talking about Judaism, although there are two scenes. One where Ike Barinholtz, or not Ike, did I say Ike Barinholtz?
Yeah.
I didn't mean that. David Krumholtz.
There you go.
Ike Barinholtz is a very different, great Jewish actor, very different
comedic
actor. No,
not an Oppenheimer.
No, not an Oppenheimer at all. When David Krumholtz pops up and talks to Oppenheimer about feeling alienated in Germany, I got a little choked up. And when later Oppenheimer talks to his colleague about their different motivations for doing scientific research and wanting to be part of the Manhattan Project, and Oppenheimer talks about feeling a kinship with the people who are being killed and ostracized in Germany, that really got me, especially because the real Oppenheimer spent a good portion of his earnings bringing Jewish scientists out of Germany, which I'd say contributed more to American greatness than the atomic bomb did. I think that's not a controversial thing to say.
I don't think so.
Especially because one of them killed hundreds of thousands of people and the other one didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I felt very emotional about this movie, and I took a million notes as I was thinking about it today. So I think hopefully we'll talk about it in a succinct enough amount of time. But I have a lot to say. What specifically caught you about the movie?
Just watching him grapple with what he was doing for the entire movie. Like I don't think there's a second that you see him where he's not grappling with like at least two or three different things all at once, you know, and trying to come to terms with, if it's not the relationship that he has with his wife, but also maintaining that relationship with Jean, I think her name was, the Florence Pugh character. You know, he knows from the beginning, okay, building a bomb is inherently devastating. And, there's never any false illusion that, like what he's doing is, I don't think he ever feels like it's necessarily like heroic or anything. It's just more of a situation like, if I don't, somebody else will, sort of thing. So it's almost like he wants to be able to be the one to control it, which is really like kind of it's a pretty egocentric kind of thing, to be the one who be like, I'm the man who can control like I'm the best person, this person best suited, to make this thing and to handle this thing. And just to watch that weight, watch him put that weight on his shoulders. Cillian Murphy, has been just a great actor for years and years and years and years. And I know he's been, lead in some other movies, and I've seen a lot of his movies. I saw Breakfast on Pluto years ago, and I was just telling my wife about Red Eye and like what a cool movie it was, and like how cool Cillian Murphy is in it. And of course, he's great in every Nolan movie that he's in. But this performance is, I mean, it's an instant. We were talking a couple episodes ago. We talked about how it takes certain movies or certain performances. You got to give them a few years before they can be described as classics. Like, I don't think we have to wait here. I think like this movie, I think Cillian Murphy is like, this is a Daniel Day-Lewis, There Will Be Blood, Robert De Niro, Raging Bull. Like this is a performance for all time.
I totally agree. I'm going to go back to the Jewish thing once more because it's related to what you just said about him wrestling with the gravity of what he's doing. So like with most of his themes, Nolan will bring it up and he'll remind you of it throughout the movie, but he won't hammer you over the head with it. And that happens here, especially with the I am Jewish, Hitler's going to get a bomb, that's the end of us. And that's the end of Western society, but it's also the end of my people. And maybe because Oppenheimer was staunchly secular, he doesn't struggle with what being Jewish means for what he's doing and the harm he's going to cause. He doesn't have like a Talmudic struggle with what he's doing. And because of that, I would love to see, and I don't think it would be better. In fact, I don't think it would be as good, but I would love to see a Coen brothers take on this story, because I think the Oppenheimer versus Strauss, two very different kind of Jew, like the secular genius versus the reform but religious politician who come from very different backgrounds and have very different objectives when it comes to nuclear power. It was very interesting. And it kind of reminded me of A Serious Man with Abelman versus Gopnik, although not really, because Cy Abelman, who I know you can't stand, was not quite the villain that Strauss was in this movie. Or maybe it's more like Howard versus Arno in Uncut Gems, although I think Arno's not necessarily supposed to be Jewish, but you see Morning Yamka in the movie, so whatever. And that's like the Jew on Jew violence there. I think the Coens, or maybe the Safdies, could have an interesting take on this story. It would be cool. But to really hone in on the struggle that you do see in the movie, watching this kind of psychopathic young man who is going to poison his teacher with cyanide go from that to having to actually deal with the consequences of having probably led to the deaths of over 250,000 people, and see how that crushes his body. Like he becomes, like, granted, he gets older throughout the movie, but he also becomes more inward and small and gray and gaunt. His hair gets smaller as the movie goes on. He's got like a little Jufro in the beginning as he's doing the Manhattan Project. He's got a regular but kind of like poofy haircut, and when he's older, he's cut his hair super short. He's literally shrinking into himself. And Oppenheimer was a small man, and Cillian Murphy is a small man, and they really accentuate that more as the movie goes on.
Well, they mentioned a couple of times there's a few scenes where people have to bring him food, like, here, you need to eat.
Right.
Like, it happens, on more than one occasion, because it's probably just something like he didn't have time for. He was too busy. He was too busy building the bomb. And living that 24/7. Where people had to remind him to eat. And that's funny, because I read there were things about that, like that what would happen with Cillian Murphy, the act, on set, where he would into what he was doing, and just so bogged down by the weight of just even playing the character that people would have to remind him to eat, and he wouldn't go out to dinner with the cast and things like that. He just apparently took on quite a lot just to play this part.
His old co-star Christian Bale was rubbing off on him.
That's right.
I do like to think that, as much as it was, they did overtly. I mean, Krumholtz at one point is like, if you don't eat more, you're going to lose you between the cushions. It's a pretty funny line on the train. I do like this thought that he was imploding from the pressure of what he was going through. And then the scenes after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks, where you see the effect it's having on him physically, or not physically, I guess more representationally, metaphorically, those are the most beautiful shots in the movie. I mean, they're insane. Oh, yeah. That's what made me feel super sucked in. And those are also some of the most three-dimensional parts of the movie too, because the background sort of flickers out of existence, and all he can see is the damage he's caused, or that he's allowed to have been caused because of what he's done. It's amazing. It also has an incredible script. Just unbelievable.
Unreal. How do you even keep something like that straight? It's very it's the closest cousin, especially in the Nolan filmography. I mean, the closest thing I think stylistically just would be, I think Dunkirk is an obvious comparison, with the three different timelines that are all kind of happening at once. And I think it's done in a similar way. And like you said, it takes some time to get used to, what's going on. But I thought, maybe after, like I said, maybe 20, 30 minutes, you're kind of into it and kind of figure, you kind of get your bearings about you, and then it's, no big deal from there. And you kind of, you're into it from there, and it's okay. But yeah, I think there's definitely a comparison to Dunkirk there. And Dunkirk walked so Oppenheimer could run.
And Following crawled so Dunkirk could walk.
Absolutely.
Following, which I watched today for the first time, is also told in 3 different timelines. Now, granted, they're much closer together than, well, they're not closer together. They're a little bit closer together than Dunkirk, and they're much closer together than Oppenheimer, where these 3 timelines take place years apart from each other. And Dunkirk is done in one's an hour, one's a day, and one's a week, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And then in Following, it's over the course of a few days, but they all lead to the same conclusion. I was shocked when I saw Following how much it reminded me of so many of Nolan's other movies. The bad guy's name is Cobb, so that was obviously reused in Inception. There's a Batman logo on a door in the movie, so Dark Knight trilogy obviously comes out of that. The 3 timelines, multiple timelines are used, and asynchronicity is used in, you mentioned Dunkirk, Oppenheimer, sort of Tenet. I mean, that's more linear than you think it is, but some of it's happening backwards and some of it's happening forwards. Although Memento is happening in 2 different timelines that also kind of more like Tenet meet in the middle. Yeah, the asynchronicity is amazing. But yeah, back to the script. Can I complain for a minute? Not about this movie, but just in general.
Yeah.
So I think maybe at some point in the future, I am going to complain on this podcast, if I haven't already, about Aaron Sorkin. Okay, I was thinking about this earlier today, because I know I don't like television shows that are written and run by Aaron Sorkin. I don't love The West Wing. I don't like Studio 60. I don't like The Newsroom. Don't care for Sports Night. I do like movies written by Sorkin and directed by other people. And then I noticed that I also like movies that are written and directed by Sorkin, like Molly's Game and The Trial of Chicago 7.
Yeah, both good.
But I didn't see Being the Ricardos. And I've heard this movie compared to Being the Ricardos because of, quote, people talking in rooms. And this is my complaint. I want people to stop using this Aaron Sorkin coined phrase, people talking in rooms. He said this about himself when The Social Network came out. He goes, Fincher is good at making these moody visuals, and I'm good at writing people talking in rooms. And now people just use this phrase. Shut up. Aaron Sorkin is not the best person who's ever done this. And also some of his style, which I don't feel is in Oppenheimer. I feel like Nolan really has his own style of dialogue and dialogue delivery. But I feel like where Sorkin's style has rubbed off on people the wrong way is in, and now here's my little complaint about Mission Impossible 7. There are 2 scenes in Mission Impossible 7 that I found so annoying, and they're both talky scenes. One is at the beginning of the movie, spoiler alert for Mission Impossible 7. At the beginning of the movie, you have the entire intelligence community gathered around to tell the director of intelligence of the United States about Ethan Hunt. And they're all finishing each other's sentences constantly. Like they're all one hive mind. And you could make the case that, oh, this is all one hive mind, and that's what it's trying to represent. Although no Mission Impossible movie before that did that. And I know that because I just watched all 7 of them at once. And if it had just been that scene, I would have been like, yes, they're a blob of bureaucracy and clandestine activity. And that's a good reason to have had them do that weird stylized talking that sounded like Sorkin dialogue coming out of multiple people. But then later in the movie, the IMF guys do it while they're talking to Haley Atwell about why she should join the IMF. And are we to assume that they're a blob of blah, blah, blah? No, they're the good guys. So Sorkin screwed that movie for me a little bit, I think. It felt like it was inspired by his talk. Okay, so I'm done. I got that out of my system. You know who's better at dialogue, just as good as Oppenheimer dialogue? Sarah Polley. Her movies are all very dialogue heavy and incredible. Or freaking, how about Billy Wilder? How about Sidney Lumet? Watch some old movies. Get some media literacy. Stop thinking that Sorkin is the only person who's heavy dialogue movies. Watch 12 Angry Men. What is wrong with people? Yeah, I'm breathing. Jake's telling me to breathe. You can't see this, but Jake is telling me to breathe. Okay.
You're not wrong, though.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Will you take over? I need a second.
Yeah. One thing that kept surprising me, and this is another reason I don't watch trailers, because a movie like Oppenheimer still has the ability to surprise me with casting, where I'm watching this movie and I'm like, number one, did not know that was Josh Hartnett until the movie was over, and my wife told me it was Josh Hartnett.
No way.
Could not place it. Like, I just like, oh yeah, there's that guy again.
Okay, so question, did you know it was Gary Oldman?
I did, yes. That one I spotted. And I immediately left. I'm like, oh, great. Guy gets to play Churchill and Truman. Like, really? Gary Oldman, selfish much? Like,
He deserves it. He's so good.
he is so good. And that was a great scene, too. Just that one scene. And a lot of these, the surprise actors in it, you only have like one scene. Like, Gary Oldman's got this one scene that's just great. And he's perfect for it. And Casey Affleck, who I know is kind of, the disgraced Casey Affleck, but oh my gosh, he's really great in that one scene that he's in. And again, it was just a surprise to see him. I didn't know Josh Hartnett was in it. I'm trying to think there was just a couple of other surprises in it, and everyone just Matt Damon again was just so good in this. And here's my thing with Matt Damon, underrated. I feel like Matt Damon doesn't get enough credit.
Can I tell you why Matt Damon is incredible? Because Matt Damon rarely ever doesn't play Matt Damon, including in Oppenheimer, and yet he makes it work in everything he's in. In fact, the only movie I can think of in recent memory where he didn't play Matt Damon was The Last Duel, and he was also wildly incredible in that movie.
Yeah,
but
he just makes it work. Whatever he does, he makes it work. He puts his little mustache on, and that's it. And then he's Matt Damon with a mustache, but man, he's great, and I love him.
A funny tweet that I saw was speaking of people who popped up, but I think this is after our time a little bit. They're like, I spent the whole movie very distracted by the fact that Drake Bell was in this, but didn't really have any lines. He's the guy from Drake and Josh, but he has, in his adult life, lost a ton of weight and looks like a normal person. He's actually quite handsome now.
That's right.
He was in a really fun show that I'm sort of sad is gone with John Stamos. I can't remember what it was called. But they had a show where they played father and son. That was good. And is gone now, which is too bad. But another Jewish actor who popped up that really blew my mind. Actually, I'm going to go back to the Jew thing one more time. Because the Harry Truman scene, because I was thinking as I'm watching that movie, I know Harry Truman, he claimed that he almost joined the Klan when he was young, but didn't because they didn't accept Catholics. At least that's the narrative that the Truman movie starring Gary Sinise has led me to believe is true. So as I'm watching that movie, I'm like, or that scene, I was thinking, oh, this is the guy who like probably doesn't like Oppenheimer because he's a whiny little crybaby Jew. He did call him a crybaby, but
he did literally. Yeah. And
I was like, oh, maybe he's like anti-Semitic too. And then I remembered, Harry Truman is responsible for the recognition of the state of Israel. So can't pin that on that historical figure.
Not this time.
No, but Oldman did play him as sort of a villain, which was interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, Truman's usually, you don't see a lot of anti-Truman stuff out there other than, fringe things here and there. So yeah, he was straight up mean. He was just mean. He was just cruel.
I think if you're Japanese, you probably see anti-Truman stuff.
That's true. Yeah, that's probably true. It's just not as common as like, some of the other, there've already been, George Bush was only president like 20 years ago. There've already been, 2 feature films by prominent directors about what a doofus he was. So,
right. Actually, what I said, people were pretty silent during this screening, but James Remar's character actually got the audience to roar. He played the Secretary of War when they're deciding which cities in Japan to attack.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. And he said the one that crosses Kyoto off the list.
Yep. And he says, well, we can't do that because of its historical significance. And also my wife and I spent our honeymoon there.
Yeah.
Great people.
That was one of the few times, the crowd who just like, it was almost like a gasp of something. Yep. It was just,
What an incredible scene. Oh, so here's a really important thing we haven't talked about yet, the sound design of this movie. And I think, look, people have quibbled mostly recently with The Dark Knight Rises and Tenet that the sound mixing on Nolan's movies is screwed up. That was not the case in this movie. I didn't have subtitles. I understood pretty much everything that everyone was saying. How'd you do that? I know you have trouble with that sometimes.
Yeah, pretty good. For the most part. Yeah. I had my hearing aids in. It was loud as hell. There was a couple of parts.
Sure was.
We're just a little, couple of actors were a little mumbly, a couple accents, but so there's maybe a handful of lines that I couldn't quite make out, but for the most part, I thought I understood it pretty well, dialogue wise, which, I was happy with it.
So I want to talk about Nolan's sound for a little bit. I watched, like I said, I watched Following today.
Mm-hmm.
Following is the only Nolan movie that I can think of that didn't have his signature score. I believe that there are only 3 scenes in Oppenheimer that I haven't looked this up. This is just off memory. I think there are maybe 3 scenes in Oppenheimer that don't have any music. And I thought that was done to amazing effect. And those scenes off the top of my head were the Secretary of War scene we just talked about, Robert Downey Jr. melting down at the end.
Oh my gosh, so good.
And the bomb going off. I don't think there are any other scenes that don't have music playing. And that lets the audience know what is happening right now is crazy. What is happening right now is this is what you're supposed to be focusing on. Don't worry about the ambient music or even the ambient feeling where I'm Terrence Malick for the first 30 minutes of the movie. Think about just what the actors are saying and doing in this moment. It's a big deal. And I thought that was done brilliantly. And I'm watching Following, and I was like, oh, this doesn't have like his attention to sound. And I was wrong. There's a scene where with the guy who turns out to be the villain and the protagonist, his name's not protagonist, this isn't Tenet, but where they meet each other. And there's a lot of attention paid to like what the sound of the good guy's spoon stirring in his coffee mug is doing, what the sound of the bad guy, any motion he's making with his hands when they break into apartments. That's what the movie's about, them, these two guys breaking into apartments. What a silent apartment sounds like when you get nervous about someone maybe coming home. And it's very cool. And then throughout Nolan's career, the music has played a very big role. And like in Oppenheimer, there is ambient music in a very Nolan style playing through most of his scenes. I think much more so than in most, especially most action movies, except for maybe like Michael Bay. Bay loves playing just like bum, 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 bum.
Oh yeah.
But this is just really above and beyond. And then we mentioned this already, but Nolan's cinematographer, Hoyte van Hoytema, I don't see how, I mean, he's definitely going to get nominated for an Oscar for this. He was nominated, but didn't win for Dunkirk.
Right.
I'd be shocked if anything came out that rivaled this in terms of cinematography.
I would be shocked if anything comes out that rivals this until the next Nolan movie comes out, probably.
In terms of cinematography?
Yeah, in terms of cinematography, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Rodrigo Prieto gets something he'll definitely be recognized for Killers of the Flower Moon. I can tell you just by what I've seen of it so far, that movie's going to look crazy.
Yep, yeah, and all Scorsese movies, so yeah.
And Dune is also coming out this year.
That'll look amazing, yep.
I don't know what else. I mean, look, there's always surprises near the end of the year. Hoyte van Hoytema. What a name and what a job. Good work. 5 stars.
And yeah, on the score too. This is only the second time he's worked with this guy. Like Hans Zimmer did the scores for like Inception, with the big like bong, all that. And, but now he's using Ludwig Göransson, who did the Black Panther scores, and he did Tenet as well, which has pretty good music. Tenet has its faults, but this guy is one of the best composers right now, and the work he did here, is really exceptional.
Do you have anything else you want to say about Oppenheimer?
Well, we didn't really touch on the women, I think, too much, but Emily Blunt, I follow a lot of Oscar blogs and things, and I've been seeing obviously a lot of Oppenheimer talk on here. Picture, director, is it Nolan's year? I mean, Cillian Murphy, obviously. Robert Downey Jr. is getting a lot of talk, and I think that's probably going to happen. And then I've seen Emily Blunt on some lists too. And for the first, maybe 2 hours of the movie, I'm like, gosh, she really just hasn't been, she hasn't been in it that much. She hasn't had that, that many lines or that much to do. But then everything she does in the last like hour or so of the movie, she just crushes, and she is awesome. And that scene she has at the end, when Benny Safdie comes up to them, just the chef's kiss perfection. I mean, Emily Blunt, really just, I know Killers of the Flower Moon's coming and Dune is coming and all these other movies are coming, but I'm happy if we just give the awards to Oppenheimer this year. Let's just do that and we'll be good.
I feel the same way. I also think, look, Nolan has a problem. I don't know that he's a problem with women, but he has a problem with female characters. He doesn't know how or isn't interested in it. Maybe this movie really is the anti-Barbie, where he just gives the women very little to do. Although, like you said, Emily Blunt gets to be the only character with integrity by the end of the movie. The Benny Safdie thing was amazing. Her interrogation by douchebag McGee.
Oh, Jason Clarke, man, he was so good in this and so detestable, and just and I most of the things I remember him from are like heroic. He was in like The War for the Planet of the Apes, and like where he's so good in that. And he's one of those guys who, again, is every time he shows up and everything, he's good in everything. I think he's just a good like another one of those good like underrated actors, and he's really good in this. Just hate him so much.
I mean, Jason Clarke was part of ruining the Terminator franchise, so I can't forgive him for that. And his television show Brotherhood, very complicated character. That show's great. It's a totally forgotten show. It's him and Jason Isaacs they play brothers in Providence. One is a criminal and one is a politician. It's a great forgotten show because I'm pretty sure it was on Showtime, and nobody cares about Showtime shows.
No.
But when she like beats back she's the only one who gets a zing in against his character. Incredible. Mm-hmm. And I also thought that Florence Pugh, though she was also not given a lot to do, and her character is really just like the Marion Cotillard in Inception of this movie, where she's sort of more of a ghost haunting him than anything. In fact, I think look, I don't know if this is part of the text of the movie. I don't even know if it's part of the subtext, but there's a bit where you're trying to figure out why Oppenheimer is putting himself through this investigation. It's not a trial. It's a hearing, like a closed door hearing that will decide whether or not he gets his security clearance. And you don't know why he's doing it, because he is being, on the record, dragged through the mud by Jason Clarke and this panel.
Tony Goldwyn, too, who I didn't know was in the movie either.
Very good.
Yeah.
And I've always thought of him as more of like a soap opera-y kind of guy, but he's very, very, very good in this.
Mm-hmm.
And so is the old man on the panel, whoever he is.
Great. Yeah, the dissenter, the one who dissented. Yep.
So he's putting himself through this. You don't know why. And then in my interpretation of the movie, it is implied that Oppenheimer suspects that Florence Pugh's character has been murdered by the government for communist suspicions that she might be funneling information about the Manhattan Project to the Russians through Oppenheimer because of his attachment to her, and he's having an affair. He had an affair with her during the Manhattan Project. And one way that Oppenheimer can get closure on that is by getting her so-called suicide note, which wasn't signed. They flash it towards him, or Strauss does. Strauss and the idiot from Chronicle, Dane DeHaan.
Yeah. Also really good in this movie, though.
Yes, he's excellent. In this movie, I can. No problem. I have no complaints about
Malek, too. Rami Malek did not know he was in this movie.
For about 5 seconds he's in this movie. He does a good job.
Very important 5 seconds.
But Dane DeHaan and Robert Downey Jr., in their manipulation of Oppenheimer, flash him the suicide note. And I got the sense that Oppenheimer decided to put himself through this hearing because they tell him that he can get a copy of the note only if he appeals the rejection and has a hearing. And in that way, Florence Pugh is the ghost that is motivating the third act of the movie, much like Marion Cotillard's ghost, Dream Ghost, haunts Leonardo DiCaprio in Inception. And I could see feeling right. And I could see feeling like that's not sufficient for a female presence in the movie. And I would not argue with that. I still think it's a 5-star movie.
Agree.
I think we talked about this for like an hour. I hope you like this because it was super long. Anyway, we'll be back next week to talk about 1995. It got bumped a week, but it's going to be shorter. But it's Heat and it's Muriel's Wedding. Those movies rule.
My wife is very excited for this one. This is the episode she's been looking forward to. So yeah, come on back and listen with her.